would call it inevitable. I completely agree that it is. I view this as a battle of the mind, not a battle of politics. And if we had been having this meeting 150 years ago or 300 years ago, we could have all agreed to the rule of thumb, right? We have a right to discipline our wives, but we just need to make sure the stick is smaller than our thumb. And we would agree that that's okay and socially acceptable. Little by little, we have changed so that now I could ask everyone here, and hopefully everyone would say that is completely unacceptable. That is my hope, that in 500 years, when Tony Soprano decides to start up his own government, all of us go, "You're a wife beater? That's awful." And we would all stand up and say, "Government? That's ridiculous. That's an old-fashioned, ridiculous idea."
Allowing ad arguendo that your premise is correct, Dave, the current situation is we already have a government and they need only take it over. In a free market anarchist society, they have the additional step of trying to put one together. So let's make it as difficult as possible.
Yeah.
Go ahead, then you can recognize the next.
I'm going to go back to what I spoke about earlier. And I disagree with the inevitable thing. The inevitable that people will try, but if we, the people, decide whatever we're going to decide and then do something, and that could mean organization, that doesn't mean, maybe we should think about government in a different sense. Government doesn't have to mean authority over. I know that's the definition. It can mean work for, which it should mean and should have done. Public servants, have we ever heard that word? Well, that's a farce. But it could be that way if we, the people, stayed involved in the government, not let them do the government. So I think it's just a mind war. It's a mind change, and we've got to help other people get there. And you had a comment.
Yeah, I'd like to know where anarchy has ever worked. It's not a new idea. You should look it up. See what it says. Any place there's been anarchy, there's mass murders, there's starvation, there's everything. Look around the world. Now, you folks have some good ideas. You have to have a government. We have to have the one that we first had when we started this country.
Thank you. And if, for those of you that didn't hear, where has it ever worked? Nowhere. Nowhere has there been a libertarian anarchist utopia. Show me a place where government has worked also, please.
Actually,
Worked in this country.
Just point as well taken. We have that problem now with governments. But in answer to the question, you might look at Iceland between about 800 AD and somewhere around 1200. They had what amounted to a working anarchy, and they were effectively invaded by governments in neighboring areas who said, "We can't have this. These people are too free." So, it's possible.
Isn't Somalia today an anarchy?
Yeah, they're getting
People, okay, Vern brings up a point. People have described Somalia today as an anarchy. It's not a Rothbardian utopia by any means.
Nor is it an anarchy. There are about 100 too many governments.
Yeah, Joel has an
Yes.
I've actually been looking for functioning anarchies, and I did find Iceland, which was an example, and also there was a book recently written called The Art of Not Being Governed, which studied anarchistic societies in Southeast Asia. And I guess my answer to, has there been a working anarchy, I would say, has there been a government that lasted? Because you've seen anarchies that have come and gone, and you've seen governments that have come and gone. And actually within, speaking with Vern last night, within societies that we have now, we have people that live more or less free. I mean, there's outlaws, and then there's also certain people that choose to live free more or less in certain ways. But I would say that governments don't last, and that anarchies don't last, but that anarchies come and anarchies go. Free societies come and free societies go, and that I guess it's just, the works of man are constantly changing, and the fact that you don't see it, I didn't see it. I didn't think there was a working anarchy, but when you look around, you can find them, and they are out there. Actually, one more thing. The word anarchy, I think, is a loaded word, and I was also speaking to Vern about this. There's a word called agorism, which is, in fact, I've got this book called The Agorist Primer, which is, it's a little bit of a an interesting book, but the agora was the Greek open market. And rather than saying anarchy, which people think means chaos, you clearly think it means chaos and murder and rape and that sort of thing, that actually agorism is the idea that rather than arranging our lives through the use of force, we do it through voluntary means, through trade, through volunteer agreements, through charity, through family, through churches. And I would say that the chaos you speak of is state-generated. It's what you see in a war, when you have governments conflicting for territory.
And to follow up on what Joel said, I disagree just a little bit. Republics last the longest. They don't last, but they last the longest until we, the people, start liking the benefits and asking for government benefits. Then we slip into democracies and then into socialism, and then we fall apart. And then we start over again.
And briefly mentioning that, I would say that if you're looking at human history, pre-government, you have 100,000 years, depending on the opinion of people living in anarchistic tribal societies, which so most of human government we have been living ungoverned, is the understanding that I have. And so while you say republics have been long-lived, they have all been finite.
Go to Karen.
I disagree with the people that say that we do not have a republic, a constitutional republic, because we do. We have given it away. We sat on our butts in our couches and gave it away until it was no longer a republic. It was a democratic whatever. And then we sat around and waited until Obama came along and made us socialists. So, you know, you can talk about anarchy and you can talk about the rest of it, but where is our red, white, and blue?
Nowhere.
What are we going to do about it? Being an anarchist is fine, but we're not organized if we're anarchist. We have to have some organization that's human common sense. You have it in your families. You have it in your
The lady is absolutely correct. As Justice Black has pointed out, and I have got to paraphrase here, but we put too much emphasis on pieces of paper. When liberty goes out of the minds of the people, it doesn't matter what pieces of paper you have. And that's key, and this comes back to Vern's central point. I, as somebody who, I call myself an anarchist theoretically, I will use the Constitution, I will use the Bill of Rights as weapons to browbeat them if necessary.
Yes.
Because I would rather argue with them in court than on a battlefield.
Absolutely.
Talking about governments, we have the perfect government in the Constitution of the United States. We need to support it, we need to use it, and we need to get out of the UN, where we're given the power of the atomic bomb that you're talking about.
Mike? The premise of limited government, I feel, in any society, is a necessity. There is a need for the people in a society to create a government that is governed, that is led, mandated, controlled by those people. The problem with the government that our founding fathers established is that we have created a government that is not self-limiting in and of itself. It's grown into this living, breathing, all-powerful entity. And, you know, she's right. It's our fault. It's the people that choose to step up and do the right thing and vote one time and then sit back down and never open their mouth, never crack open a book, never express their opinion. Our government, and I agree with Lloyd too, is perfect if each and every one of us stands up and does the right thing. Become involved with local politics. Even more than that, become involved with neighborhood politics. Even more than that, become involved with your own household. Dole your kids off to school because it's, government daycare. There's some fundamental truths that we all are governed by. We all want to be happy. We all want our children to grow and prosper and benefit from the land around us. We all want opportunity. We all want to grow old and enjoy the spoils of our work. But when we set in apathy, when we are swallowed by the quagmire of mediocrity, limited government, that's an oxymoron. So it's our fault. But we still have an opportunity.
I think limited government is an oxymoron. And I think it's a pretty big if to imagine that everybody in a society would promote freedom over a long period of time. I think the concept of the Constitution is a great idea. It's wonderful. The problem is the Supreme Court decides what's constitutional or not. And they're a federal institution. Their loyalty is to the federal government. They have a conflict of interest. Anytime you have a government, there's usually, at least historically, there's always been some structure where the government is what's supposed to limit the government. And it never happens, because why would it limit itself? Dave?
I'd like to just real quickly put some perspective on the terms. And everybody knows that democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what's for lunch. Republic is 200 wolves and a lamb electing 2 wolves and a lamb to decide what's for lunch. And of course, my constitutionalist friends will point out that we're a constitutional republic, and I would say that a constitutional republic is that same 200 wolves and 100 lambs electing 2 wolves and a lamb to decide what's for lunch, but lamb isn't on the menu. Now, I'd like to see a show of hands of everybody here who believes that wolves read menus. It doesn't happen. There's one more step, that liberty is a well-armed, well-informed lamb sitting on a jury denying enforcement of